I'm standing in the middle of a crowded farmer's market in Portland, Oregon, with a canvas bag full of organic vegetables I don't even remember purchasing, and the entire world has just collapsed into a single point of focus. A man across the street, whose steel-gray eyes are locked onto mine with the intensity of a predator who's finally found the prey that got away. Caney Volkov, the man I loved with every fiber of my being. The man whose child I carried away in the dead of night 5 years ago. The man I've dreamed about, and had nightmares about in equal measure ever since, is standing less than 50 feet away from me. And judging by the way his hand has moved almost imperceptibly toward his jacket, where I know without question he keeps at least 2 weapons at all times, he's recognized not just me, but the small hand currently gripping my sundress with sticky fingers, still covered in the remnants of the chocolate croissant I'd bought him moments earlier. My son, Nikolai, my beautiful baby boy, who has his father's distinctive eyes and sharp cheekbones, and that same intense way of staring at things when he's trying to understand them, is currently chattering away about the puppies he saw at the pet store, completely oblivious to the fact that the monster who haunts my dreams and the man who gave him life are one and the same person, and that person is currently watching us with an expression I can't quite read, but that sends ice water flowing through my veins regardless. Time seems to stretch and compress simultaneously, the way it does in those crucial moments when your brain is processing too much information and trying desperately to formulate a response that will keep you alive. And I'm suddenly aware of every single detail around me. The way the afternoon sunlight catches in Caney's dark hair, which he's let grow slightly longer than he used to wear it. The expensive cut of his black suit that probably costs more than 3 months of my curator's salary. The barely perceptible tension in his shoulders that I recognize from 1,000 memories of watching him prepare for violence. And most terrifyingly, the way his lips have curved into something that's not quite a smile, but rather the expression of a wolf who's just cornered something it's been hunting for far too long. I need to run. Every instinct I've honed over 5 years of looking over my shoulder is screaming at me to grab Nikolai and disappear into the crowd. But my legs feel like they've been filled with concrete, and besides, Dominic is supposed to be meeting us here any minute now, with his easy smile and his architect's hands, and his blissful ignorance of the fact that the woman he's planning to marry is actually a completely different person than the one he thinks he knows. The irony isn't lost on me that I've spent 5 years building a life as Sarah Davis. Quiet, cultured, slightly boring Sarah who works at the museum and volunteers at Nikolai's preschool, and has never so much as gotten a speeding ticket, and all of that carefully constructed normalcy is about to shatter because I made the catastrophic mistake of thinking that Portland was far enough away from New York, that 5 years was long enough for Caney to stop looking, that I could actually have something resembling a normal life with my son, without the constant shadow of the Volkov Empire hanging over us, like a guillotine waiting to drop. "Mommy, you're squeezing too tight," Nikolai says, his little voice pulling me back from the edge of panic. And I realize that I've gripped his hand so hard that my knuckles have gone white. So I force myself to loosen my hold even as every maternal instinct I possess is screaming at me to pick him up and run until my legs give out. I watch as Caney takes a single step forward, his movement predatory and deliberate. And I know with absolute certainty that if I run now, he'll give chase. And the last thing I want is for this confrontation to happen in a crowded market where innocent people could get hurt, and where Nikolai would witness whatever violence might erupt when 5 years of rage and betrayal come face to face with 5 years of fear and desperation. My mind is racing through possibilities. I could grab Nick and duck into the nearest shop, but Caney would just follow. I could call Dominic and pray he gets here before Caney reaches us. But what exactly would my kind, gentle fiancé do against a man who's built an empire on blood and bullets? I could try to talk to Caney, to explain, but the look in his eyes suggests that words aren't going to be particularly effective against 5 years of thinking I was dead, and then discovering not only that I'm alive, but that I've been raising his son in secret while building a life with another man. The worst part, the absolute worst part that I can barely admit even to myself, is that underneath the terror and the panic and the desperate need to protect my child, there's a treacherous flutter in my chest that feels dangerously close to the way I used to feel when Caney would look at me like I was the only thing in his world that mattered, like he would burn down cities and wage wars just to keep me safe. And I hate myself for that flutter, because I know exactly what kind of man he is. I know about the bodies, the deals made in blood, the way he can look someone in the eye and end their life without a flicker of remorse. And I ran from all of that because I couldn't bear the thought of raising our child in that darkness. But God help me, seeing him now after all this time, seeing the way his eyes have found our son and the expression that's crossing his face. Something raw and hungry and almost painful in its intensity. I'm remembering why I fell in love with him in the first place, why I ignored every red flag and warning sign and dove headfirst into a relationship with the most dangerous man in New York. Because when Caney Volkov loved you, it felt like standing in the center of a hurricane where everything was calm and safe and absolutely certain. Sarah, I hear him say, and even across the distance and the crowd noise, I can hear my real name in his voice. The name I haven't used in 5 years, the name that belongs to a different woman who made different choices and paid for them in ways that still wake me up gasping in the middle of the night. He's moving toward us now, cutting through the crowd with the kind of unconscious authority that makes people step aside without even realizing they're doing it. And I'm out of time, out of options, out of any possibility except the one where I have to face the man I loved and betrayed and left for dead in equal measure. I scoop Nikolai up into my arms, despite the fact that he's getting too big for this, and protests with a squirm, and I turn on my heel and start walking as quickly as I can, without actually running, heading toward where I parked my sensible Honda Civic 3 blocks away, praying that I can get there before Caney catches up to us, knowing in my heart that I can't outrun him, but trying anyway, because what else am I supposed to do? "Mommy, what's wrong?" Nikolai asks, his small hands framing my face with the kind of innocent concern that makes my heart crack in half. And I want to tell him everything and nothing. Want to explain that the man following us is his father, and also the reason we've been hiding. Want to promise him that everything will be okay, even though I have no idea if that's true. Instead, I press a kiss to his forehead and lie with all the practice I've gained over 5 years of lying to everyone, including myself, telling him that everything is fine, that Mommy just remembered we need to get home for an important phone call, and isn't it exciting how fast we can walk when we really try? I can feel Caney behind us, can sense his presence the way you can sense a storm coming even before the first drops of rain fall. And I'm fumbling for my keys with hands that won't stop shaking when I hear his voice again. Closer now. Close enough that I can hear the barely controlled fury underneath the dangerous calm. "You run from me now, and I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your considerably shortened life," he says, and the threat is delivered in the same tone he might use to comment on the weather, which somehow makes it infinitely more terrifying, because I know he means every word. I spin around, still holding Nikolai, positioning my body between my son and his father in a gesture that's probably futile but that I can't help making anyway. And I finally meet Caney's eyes directly for the first time in 5 years. Up close, I can see the changes that time has carved into him. New lines around his eyes, a harder set to his jaw, a coldness in his gaze that wasn't quite so pronounced before. And I realize that whatever I took from him when I left, it fundamentally altered something in him, turned him into an even more dangerous version of the already lethal man I used to know. His eyes drop to Nikolai, and I watch as multiple emotions flicker across his face too quickly for me to catalog them all. But I catch recognition and hunger, and something that might be pain, before his expression locks down into unreadable blankness. "Is this him?" Caney asks, and his voice has gone soft in a way that's somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. And I find myself nodding before I can think better of it. My throat too tight with fear and regret, and a dozen other emotions I can't even name. "My son. The child you stole from me. The boy I've been searching for since the day I thought you died in that car crash that I now realize was nothing but an elaborate lie." He takes another step closer, and I can smell his cologne. Still the same expensive scent that used to cling to my skin after nights spent tangled in his sheets. And I'm frozen between the impulse to protect Nikolai and the muscle memory of my body that still remembers what it was like to be in Caney's orbit, to be the center of his dangerous attention. "Caney, please," I start. But I don't even know how to finish that sentence because what am I pleading for? Mercy, understanding, time, forgiveness. And would any of those things matter to a man who's just discovered that the woman he loved faked her death and disappeared with his child? Nikolai has gone very still in my arms, his child's intuition picking up on the tension even if he doesn't understand it. And he's staring at Caney with those gray eyes that are an exact mirror of his father's. And I can see the moment when Caney registers the resemblance, the undeniable proof of paternity written in the architecture of our son's face. Something in Caney's expression shifts, becomes almost hungry, and he reaches out one hand as if to touch Nikolai, and I instinctively step back, clutching my son tighter, which is apparently the wrong move because Caney's eyes flash with something dark and possessive and absolutely terrifying. "You don't get to keep him from me," Caney says, and it's not a threat but rather a statement of absolute fact, delivered with the kind of certainty that comes from being a man who's never been denied anything he's decided to take. "You don't get to decide that I don't deserve to know my own son, that you can just erase me from his life and replace me with whatever pathetic substitute you've been playing house with." The mention of Dominic sends another spike of fear through me, because I hadn't even thought about what Caney might do to the man who's been acting as father to his child. The kind, gentle architect who reads Nikolai bedtime stories and teaches him about buildings and has never hurt anyone in his entire life. And I'm suddenly terrified not just for myself and my son, but for the innocent man who's about to walk into the middle of a war he doesn't even know exists. "He doesn't know," I blurt out, the words tumbling over themselves in my desperation to protect at least one person from this disaster. "Dominic doesn't know about you, about any of it. He thinks I'm a widow, that Nikolai's father died before he was born, and he's a good man, Caney. He doesn't deserve whatever you're thinking about doing to him." I hate how my voice shakes. Hate that I'm showing weakness to a man who was trained from childhood to exploit any vulnerability. But I can't help it because I'm watching everything I've built over 5 years crumble around me and I don't know how to stop it. Caney's smile is sharp enough to cut, and there's no warmth in it whatsoever. Just the cold satisfaction of a hunter who knows he's won. "A good man," he repeats, tasting the words like they're something bitter. "Tell me, Sarah, does this good man know what you really are? Where you really come from? What you were running from when you fell into his ordinary little life?" He takes another step closer, and now he's near enough that I could reach out and touch him if I wanted to. Close enough that I can see the way his jaw clenches with the effort of maintaining his control. Does he know that the woman he's planning to marry once belonged to the devil? That she carried the devil's child? That she loved the devil so completely that she had to fake her own death just to escape him? The possessive way he says, "belonged," makes something in my stomach twist with emotions I absolutely do not want to examine. And I'm saved from having to respond by Nikolai's small voice cutting through the tension. "Mommy, who is this man?" my son asks, and the innocent question lands like a bomb in the space between us. And I watch Caney's expression shift again. Watch him look at our child with an intensity that makes me want to cry, because I know exactly what that look means. It means he's already claimed Nikolai in his mind, already decided that our son belongs to him. And anyone who's ever known Caney Volkov understands that once he decides something is his, he will move heaven and earth and wade through rivers of blood to keep it. I open my mouth to answer, to say something that will deflect or delay or somehow protect us from this moment. But before I can speak, I see Dominic's familiar figure approaching from down the street, his hand raised in a wave, his face lit up with that uncomplicated happiness that I know is about to be destroyed forever. And I realize with a sinking certainty that everything is about to get infinitely worse. Caney follows my gaze, and when he turns back to me, there's something almost amused in his expression, a dark humor that promises nothing good. So that's him. he says quietly, intimately, like we're sharing a private joke. That's the man you chose to replace me with, the stand-in father for my son. He reaches into his jacket pocket, and my entire body tenses, prepared for him to pull out a weapon. But instead he withdraws a simple business card, pressing it into my hand with fingers that linger just a fraction too long. You have 24 hours to come to me willingly and explain everything. Why you ran, why you lied, why you let me think you were dead while you were out here playing at being normal. And if you do that, if you come to me and tell me the truth, then maybe I'll let you keep breathing long enough to watch our son grow up. He leans in close enough that his lips brush my ear, close enough that I can feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. And his next words are whispered with the kind of intimate menace that only someone who's loved you can truly achieve. But if you run from me again, if you try to take my son and disappear, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth, and I will make you wish that car crash 5 years ago had been real. And that's a promise, Sarah, not a threat. Then he's stepping back, straightening his jacket, and transforming in the space of a heartbeat from the vengeful lover to the polished businessman. And by the time Dominic reaches us with his cheerful greeting and his questions about whether we found everything we needed at the market, Caney is already walking away, melting into the crowd like he was never there at all. I'm left standing there with my son in my arms and my fiancé's hand on my shoulder, and a business card burning a hole in my palm, knowing that in 24 hours, I'm going to have to make an impossible choice between the life I've built and the man I never really escaped, between protecting my son and facing the consequences of a betrayal that apparently time hasn't healed at all. And as I look down at the card with its simple embossed text, just a phone number and a single word, Volkov, I realize with a clarity that feels like drowning that I never really had a choice at all, because Caney Volkov has found us, and when the devil comes collecting, there's nowhere left to run. The business card sits on my bathroom counter like a coiled snake, its stark white surface and simple black text mocking me every time I glance at it, which has been approximately every 30 seconds for the past 6 hours since Dominic finally fell asleep in our bedroom and I retreated to this small sanctuary under the pretense of taking a bath. But really, because I needed to be alone with the panic that's been clawing at my throat since the moment Caney's eyes found mine across that market. I'm sitting on the closed toilet lid in my pajamas, hair wet and dripping onto my shoulders, and I'm trying to remember how to breathe normally, while my mind replays the encounter over and over, analyzing every word, every gesture, every micro-expression on Caney's face as he looked at our son for the first time with the full knowledge that Nikolai was his. And the worst part is that underneath all the terror and the guilt and the bone-deep fear of what's coming, there's a treacherous part of me that felt something almost like relief when I saw him, like some fundamental part of my soul that's been holding its breath for 5 years finally exhaled because the waiting, the constant looking over my shoulder, the exhausting vigilance of always being ready to run, all of that is over now because the thing I've been running from has finally caught me. I pick up the card for what must be the 100th time, turning it over in my fingers as if the blank white back will suddenly reveal some hidden message or instruction that will tell me what to do, how to fix this impossible situation where every option leads to someone getting hurt. 24 hours, Caney said. 24 hours to come to him and explain. And I know what he really means is 24 hours to prostrate myself before him and beg for mercy that may or may not come. To lay out every detail of my betrayal and hope that the man who once loved me enough to make me believe in fairy tales might still have enough of that love left to keep him from destroying everything I've built. But how do I explain to him that I ran, not because I stopped loving him, but because I loved him too much to watch what his world would do to our child? That every day I spent with him was a day I spent knowing that his enemies would eventually use me against him. That the violence and the danger and the constant shadow of death that surrounded him like a second skin would eventually touch our baby. And I couldn't. I couldn't let that happen no matter how much it killed me to leave. The memory comes flooding back unbidden, as vivid and terrible as if it's happening right now, instead of 5 years ago. I'm standing in the hallway outside Caney's office in the penthouse we shared, one hand pressed against the wall for support, and the other cradling my still flat stomach where a 6-week-old embryo is growing. And I've just come to tell him the news that I'm pregnant, that we're going to have a baby, that all our careful precautions somehow failed, and I'm terrified and thrilled in equal measure. But I freeze before I reach the door, because I hear voices inside. Caney's and Victor's. And Victor is speaking in that low, urgent tone that always meant something dangerous was being discussed. And I know I should walk away. Know that Caney has always been careful to keep me separated from the worst parts of his business. But something in Victor's voice makes me press my ear to the door instead. "She's your weakness, Caney," Victor is saying, his voice carrying that particular blend of concern and calculation that I've never quite trusted. "Everyone knows it, and eventually someone is going to use her against you. And when that happens, you won't be able to protect both her and the Empire. You'll have to choose, and that choice will destroy you." There's a long pause, and then Caney's voice, weary in a way I've rarely heard it. "I know, but I can't. I won't give her up, Victor, I can't. She's the only thing in this whole goddamn world that makes me feel like I'm something other than a monster." The words should have been comforting, should have made me feel cherished and protected. But instead they send ice water through my veins because I'm suddenly, horrifyingly aware that Victor is right. That my existence in Caney's life is a vulnerability. And that vulnerabilities in his world don't last long. What I hear next changes everything. Transforms my fairy tale into a nightmare with a few carefully chosen words. "Then let me handle it," Victor says, and there's something in his tone that makes my blood run cold. "Make it look like an accident, something quick and clean, and you'll grieve, but you'll survive. And more importantly, the Empire will survive. You'll be stronger without her, Caney, untouchable again. And isn't that what your father trained you to be?" The silence that follows seems to stretch for an eternity, and I'm standing there with my hand over my mouth to keep from crying out, waiting to hear Caney reject this monstrous suggestion, waiting for him to defend me, to tell Victor that he'd rather burn his empire to the ground than harm a hair on my head. But the silence continues, heavy and damning. And then Victor speaks again. "You don't have to say yes. You don't even have to know about it. Just look the other way for one night, and I'll take care of everything. And tomorrow you can mourn your tragic loss and move forward without this weight around your neck." And Caney, my Caney, the man whose child is growing inside me, says nothing, absolutely nothing. And that silence is somehow worse than if he'd agreed outright, because it means he's actually considering it, actually weighing the cost of my life against the security of his empire. I don't wait to hear more. Don't stay to find out if Caney will ultimately refuse or accept Victor's horrific offer. Because in that moment I realize with crushing clarity that it doesn't actually matter what Caney decides, because Victor has already decided, has already marked me for death. And whether Caney agrees or not, I'm living on borrowed time in a world where I'm seen as nothing more than a liability to be eliminated. I stumble away from the door, my mind racing, my hand still pressed protectively over my stomach, and I'm suddenly aware that I'm not just making decisions for myself anymore. I have a child to protect, a baby who deserves a chance to grow up somewhere safe, somewhere far away from men who casually discuss murder over afternoon drinks in expensive penthouses. The next 72 hours pass in a blur of desperate planning and careful lies. I call an old friend from college, Marcus, who works in digital security and owes me a favor from when I covered for him during a particularly messy breakup years ago. And I tell him I need to disappear, need documents and a paper trail that will make it look like I died without anyone being able to prove otherwise. Marcus, to his credit, doesn't ask too many questions, just tells me he'll need 48 hours and $10,000 in cash, and I raid the emergency fund Caney keeps in the safe in our bedroom, the one he thinks I don't know about, but that I discovered months ago during a bout of insomnia and restless exploration. The hardest part, the part that nearly breaks me completely, is writing the letter to Caney that I know I'll never send, the one where I pour out everything I'm feeling. The love and the fear, and the desperate hope that somehow, someday, he'll understand why I had to do this. I write about the baby, about how I wanted so badly to tell him, to see his face light up with joy at the news that he was going to be a father. And I write about Victor's plan, and about my realization that staying would mean not just risking my own life, but the life of our unborn child. And I write about how much I love him, how leaving him is killing me, but staying would kill us all eventually. I fold the letter into careful thirds, and tuck it into the locked box, where I keep my most precious possessions, knowing I'm leaving it behind, knowing Caney will probably never find it or read it, but needing to put the words somewhere because keeping them inside feels like they'll poison me from within. Then I take Marcus's carefully forged death certificate and the new identity he's created for me. Sarah Davis, born in Cleveland, unremarkable history, no connection to Caney Volkov or his world, and I stage a car accident on a rainy night in late October, driving my car off a secluded bridge with a body bag filled with weighted materials, and just enough of my DNA to make identification possible but complicated, and then I walk away from the wreckage and disappear into the night like a ghost. The months that follow are a special kind of hell, a limbo where I'm mourning the loss of the man I love while simultaneously being grateful that I escaped, where I'm terrified that Caney will somehow figure out the truth and come after me while also hoping desperately that he will, because at least then I'd know he cared enough to look. I settle in Portland because it's far enough from New York to feel safe but big enough to disappear into, and I get a job at a small museum under my new identity, and I grow round with pregnancy while living in a tiny studio apartment that smells like mildew and cooking from the Thai restaurant downstairs. And I'm so achingly lonely that some nights I almost convince myself to call Caney and tell him everything, just so I can hear his voice again. But then, Nikolai is born on a spring morning, with his father's eyes and his mother's determination to survive. And when the nurse places him in my arms for the first time, I know with absolute certainty that I made the right choice, that this perfect, innocent life is worth any sacrifice, worth any amount of loneliness or fear or regret. And I promise him silently that I'll keep him safe no matter what it costs me. The years pass in a strange sort of double exposure where I'm living my life as Sarah Davis. Quiet, predictable, boring Sarah who never causes trouble and never draws attention, while always being aware that Sarah Delacroix is still there underneath, still remembering what it felt like to be loved by a monster, still checking the news from New York obsessively for any mention of Caney or the Volkov organization, still jumping at shadows and teaching Nikolai from the earliest age that sometimes we have to leave places quickly, and that's okay. Mommy just wants us to be safe. Dominic enters my life during Nikolai's 3rd year, a kind and gentle presence who sees me at the museum, where he's consulting on a renovation project, and he asks me to coffee with such genuine, uncomplicated interest that I'm taken aback because I've forgotten what it's like to be wanted for who I am, rather than what I represent, or what vulnerability I expose. Our relationship develops slowly, carefully, and I know I'm being unfair to him by building something on a foundation of lies. But he's so good with Nikolai, so patient and steady and normal in ways that Caney never was, and I let myself believe that maybe this is my second chance. Maybe I can actually have the peaceful, ordinary life that I sacrificed everything to create. But now, sitting in my bathroom with Caney's business card burning in my hand, and the knowledge that my carefully constructed world is crumbling around me, I'm forced to confront the truth I've been avoiding for 5 years. I never actually escaped. I just delayed the inevitable. And all the running and hiding and pretending couldn't change the fundamental fact that I belong to Caney Volkov in ways that have nothing to do with choice or reason and everything to do with the kind of connection that transcends logic. The clock on my phone tells me I have 18 hours left before Caney's deadline expires. 18 hours to decide whether I'm going to walk into the devil's den willingly or wait for him to come and drag me there. And I know what I have to do, even though every instinct I possess is screaming at me to grab Nikolai and run as far and as fast as I can. I have to go to Caney, have to face him and explain and hope that somewhere in the cold, calculated heart he's developed over 5 years without me, There's still a flicker of the man who used to hold me like I was something precious, something worth protecting even from himself. The decision made, I'm reaching for my phone to call the number on the card when I hear a sound from the bedroom that makes my blood freeze in my veins. The soft click of the bedroom window sliding open. A sound that doesn't belong in a third-floor apartment. A sound that means someone has scaled the building to get to us. I'm on my feet instantly, every maternal instinct screaming. And I'm moving toward Nikolai's room down the hall when a hand closes around my arm with bruising force and spins me around, and I'm looking up into Victor's face. Older and harder than I remember, but unmistakably him. The man who wanted me dead 5 years ago and who, judging by the cold fury in his eyes, hasn't changed his mind. Did you really think you could come back from the dead and not face consequences? He asks, and his voice is soft and terrible, and I can see the gun in his other hand, can see my death written in his expression. Caney knows you're alive now, which means he knows I lied to him about confirming your death, which means I have about 12 hours before he figures out everything else I've been doing behind his back these past 5 years, and I can't let that happen, Sarah. I won't let one dead woman ruin everything I've built. The gun is rising toward my face, and I'm thinking about Nikolai sleeping in his room, and about Dominic in our bed, and about how I survived 5 years only to die in a bathroom in Portland at the hands of the man I was running from all along, when the window behind Victor explodes inward in a shower of glass, and a dark figure is coming through it with the fluid grace of a predator. And I have just enough time to recognize Caney before he's on Victor, with a violence that's both beautiful and terrifying. And I realize with a clarity that feels like falling that Caney never intended to wait 24 hours, that he's had people watching me since the moment he walked away at the market, and that Victor's appearance here is either the worst luck or the best timing depending on how you look at it. The two men crash into the wall with enough force to crack the plaster, and Caney's voice cuts through the chaos like a knife. You tried to kill her. You tried to kill the mother of my child, and you made me believe she was dead for 5 years while you systematically betrayed everything I built. And there's something in his tone that promises death, that guarantees it. And I should probably feel horror, or fear, but instead I feel a savage satisfaction that the man who drove me into hiding is finally going to pay for what he did. The fight is brief and brutal, and when it's over, Victor is on the floor with Caney's hand around his throat and a knee in his chest, and Caney is looking at me with eyes that are absolutely feral, and I can hear Dominic stirring in the bedroom, can hear his confused voice calling my name, and I know that in approximately 30 seconds, my kind, gentle fiancé is going to walk into this bathroom and discover that everything he thought he knew about me was a lie. Caney follows my gaze toward the bedroom, and then looks back at me with an expression that's almost amused despite the violence still thrumming through him. I told you that you had 24 hours to come to me willingly, he says conversationally, as if he's not currently crushing the life out of his former second-in-command. But then I had my people do a little more digging, and what they found suggested that maybe you weren't quite as safe as you thought you were, that maybe certain people had figured out you were still alive and were making plans to correct that oversight. So I decided to move up my timeline because despite everything you've done, despite the lies and the betrayal and the 5 years you stole from me, I'm apparently still incapable of letting anyone else hurt you. That privilege, Sarah, belongs exclusively to me. The silence that follows Caney's declaration is broken by Dominic's voice calling my name again from the bedroom. Closer now, concerned and confused, in that particular way. That means he's sensing something is wrong but hasn't yet comprehended the magnitude of the disaster he's about to walk into. And I'm standing frozen in my bathroom doorway, watching the man I used to love pin his former best friend to the floor, while my entire carefully constructed life implodes around me like a building demolition in slow motion. I should move, should say something, should do literally anything except stand here paralyzed while my two worlds collide in the most catastrophic way possible. But my brain seems to have short-circuited somewhere between the moment Victor put a gun to my face and the moment Caney came crashing through my window, like some kind of avenging angel wrapped in violence and expensive Italian suits. And now I'm trying to process the fact that Caney has apparently had people watching me since the market, which means he knows where I live, where I work, probably knows my entire routine down to what time I drop Nikolai off at kindergarten and what kind of coffee I order on Tuesday mornings. Sarah? Dominic appears in the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, wearing the pajama pants I bought him for his birthday, and nothing else. His architect's body soft and unthreatening in ways that make him look almost painfully vulnerable compared to Caney's predatory leanness. And I watch his expression shift from confusion to concern, to dawning horror as he takes in the scene. The broken window. The man on the floor who's still struggling weakly against Caney's iron grip. The shattered glass glittering across my bathroom tile like diamonds. And me standing in the middle of it all, with an expression that I'm sure reveals every guilty secret I've been keeping for 5 years. "What the hell is going on?" he asks, and his voice has gone high and tight with fear, and he's moving toward me with his hands outstretched like he's going to pull me away from danger. But Caney's head snaps up, and the look he levels at Dominic is so full of lethal promise that my gentle fiancé actually stumbles backward a step, some primitive part of his brain recognizing that he's in the presence of an apex predator, and survival means not making any sudden movements. "Don't," I say, and my voice comes out rough and strange, and I'm not even sure which man I'm talking to. Dominic, who's trying to protect me, or Caney, who's currently deciding whether the man who's been playing father to his son deserves to live or die. "Dominic, go back to the bedroom. Go check on Nikolai. Make sure he's still asleep, please. I'll explain everything, but right now I need you to trust me and go." I'm trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable even though my hands are shaking, and my heart is beating so hard I can feel it in my throat. And Dominic is looking at me like he's never seen me before. Like the woman standing in front of him is a stranger wearing his fiancé's face. And I suppose in a way that's exactly what I am, because Sarah Davis, the woman he fell in love with, is nothing but a carefully crafted fiction designed to hide the truth of who I really am. "I'm not leaving you with—" Dominic starts, but Caney interrupts him with a laugh that's completely devoid of humor. A sound like breaking glass that makes even Victor stop struggling for a moment, because everyone in this room can hear the barely restrained violence in it. "With me?" Caney finishes, his eyes never leaving Dominic even as he maintains his crushing grip on Victor's throat. "You're not leaving her with me, as if you have any say in what happens to Sarah, as if your presence here is anything more than a temporary inconvenience that I'm choosing to tolerate for reasons that have everything to do with not traumatizing my son, and nothing to do with any respect for you or your relationship with the woman who belongs to me." The possessive way he says "belongs to me" sends a shiver down my spine that's equal parts fear and something I absolutely refuse to acknowledge. And I can see Dominic processing the name Caney just used. The real name I've never told him. The name that belongs to a woman who existed before Sarah Davis ever did. "Sarah," Dominic repeats, and he's looking at me now with such profound betrayal in his eyes that I want to cry, want to explain everything, want to somehow make him understand that the lies weren't meant to hurt him, but to protect him from a world he's too good and too innocent to survive in. "Your name is Sarah? Not Sarah? What else have you been lying about?" The questions hang in the air like accusations, and I don't have good answers for them, because what can I possibly say that would make this better? Yes, I lied about my name, and my past, and the fact that the father of my child is alive, and happens to be one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast. And also I faked my own death 5 years ago to escape a murder plot. And I'm so sorry you're finding all this out while there's a man bleeding on my bathroom floor and a mafia boss casually threatening your life. But I really did care about you in my own broken, damaged way. Before I can formulate any kind of response, Victor makes a desperate lunge for something. Maybe the gun that got knocked away during the fight. Maybe just a last-ditch attempt at freedom. But Caney's reaction is instantaneous and brutal, slamming Victor's head into the tile with enough force that I hear a sickening crack, and Victor goes limp. Not dead, but definitely unconscious. And the casual efficiency with which Caney neutralizes the threat is a stark reminder of exactly what kind of man I fell in love with all those years ago. "Now then," Caney says, standing up and brushing off his pants like he's just finished a business meeting rather than a life-or-death struggle. "We need to have a conversation about what happens next. And I suggest we have it somewhere other than a bathroom that's currently covered in glass and blood. And I also suggest that the architect here decides very quickly whether he wants to be part of this conversation or whether he'd prefer to walk away right now and pretend none of this ever happened." The offer is delivered with a smile that doesn't reach Caney's eyes, and we all know it's not really an offer at all, but rather a test to see how Dominic will react, to see if he's the kind of man who runs at the first sign of danger, or the kind who's stupid enough to try and fight for something he thinks is his. "I'm not going anywhere without answers," Dominic says, and I have to give him credit for the way his voice only shakes slightly, for the way he's trying to stand his ground despite the fact that he's clearly terrified and completely out of his depth. And I love him in this moment for his courage, even as I hate myself for dragging him into this nightmare. Sarah, whatever your name is, you owe me an explanation. You owe me the truth about who you are and who this man is and why there's someone unconscious on your bathroom floor." He's right, of course. He deserves answers and apologies and probably a whole lot more than I can give him. But before I can open my mouth to begin the impossible task of explaining 5 years of lies, I hear a small voice from down the hall that makes my blood run cold and my heart stop in my chest. "Mommy!" I heard loud noises. "I'm scared," Nikolai calls out, and I can hear his little feet padding down the hallway toward us, and I'm moving before I can think, putting myself between my son and this scene of violence, desperate to shield him from the broken glass, and the unconscious man, and the father he doesn't know standing there with blood on his knuckles and murder in his eyes. I scoop Nikolai up just as he reaches the hallway, turning him away from the bathroom, and his small arms wrap around my neck with the automatic trust of a child who's never had reason to doubt that his mother will keep him safe. And I'm murmuring reassurances into his hair while my mind races through the options, none of which are good. I can feel Caney's eyes on us, can sense the intensity of his focus even without looking at him, and I know he's watching our son with the hungry attention of a man who's just discovered something he never knew he wanted, but now can't imagine living without. And the thought of what that means, of what Caney might do to claim the child he's already decided belongs to him, makes me hold Nikolai even tighter. "Baby, everything's okay. Mommy just accidentally broke something, and it made a loud noise." I lie smoothly, years of practice making the deception come easily, even as guilt gnaws at my conscience. "Why don't you go with Dominic back to your room and he'll read you a story until you fall back asleep, okay?" I'm trying to hand Nikolai over to Dominic, trying to get my son away from this situation before it gets any worse. But Nikolai has turned his head and is staring at Caney with those mirror image gray eyes. And I can see the moment my son's natural curiosity overcomes his sleepiness. The way he's studying this stranger in our apartment with the same intense focus that Caney used to study everything he encountered. And the resemblance between them is so striking in this moment that anyone looking at them would know instantly that they're father and son. "Who are you?" Nikolai asks, with the blunt directness of a 5-year-old who hasn't yet learned that some questions are better left unasked. And I feel rather than see Caney's entire body tense at being directly addressed by his child for the first time. And I'm terrified of what he might say, of how he might answer that innocent question in a way that will shatter everything. The silence stretches out for several long seconds, while Caney and Nikolai study each other. And I'm holding my breath, waiting for the explosion. The claim of paternity. The moment when Caney rips my son away from me, the way I ripped him away from Caney 5 years ago. And I'm already calculating how quickly I could run, where I could go, how I could possibly escape a man who's proven tonight that he has the resources to track me anywhere and the willingness to crash through windows to get to me. But instead of the possessive declaration I'm expecting, Caney's expression shifts into something I can't quite read. Something that might almost be vulnerability if I didn't know that Caney Volkov doesn't do vulnerable, and when he speaks, his voice is surprisingly gentle, carefully modulated in a way that suggests he's thinking very hard about every word. "I'm an old friend of your mother's," he says, and the lie comes so smoothly that I might almost believe it if I couldn't see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands have curled into fists at his sides like he's physically restraining himself from reaching out to touch his son. "We knew each other a long time ago, before you were born, and I just came by to visit and catch up on old times." The explanation is simple and almost believable, the kind of thing a child Nikolai's age would accept without question, but I can hear the subtext underneath it. The promise that this isn't over, that this moment of restraint is a temporary gift that Caney is giving me for reasons I don't fully understand, but suspect have something to do with not wanting to traumatize our son during their first real interaction. "Oh," Nikolai says, already losing interest in the way that children do when adult conversations become boring, and he's squirming to be put down, and I'm reluctantly setting him on his feet when he does something that makes my heart stop. He walks right up to Caney with absolutely no fear, no hesitation, just a child's natural curiosity about this tall, intense stranger in his home. "You have eyes like mine," Nikolai observes with the matter-of-fact tone of someone stating an obvious truth, and he's tilting his head to look up at Caney, and I can see Caney's entire body go rigid, can see something raw and painful flash across his face before he locks it down behind that mask of cold control he wears like armor. "Lots of people have gray eyes. My teacher says it's because of genetics," Nikolai continues, carefully pronouncing the word he's obviously learned recently and is proud of knowing. And Caney drops into a crouch so he's at eye level with our son, and the movement is so natural, so unconsciously paternal, that I feel tears burning behind my eyes because this is the moment I stole from him. This simple interaction between father and son. And no matter how justified my reasons were for running, I can't pretend that I didn't take something irreplaceable from both of them. "That's right," Caney says, and his voice has gone even softer. And he's looking at Nikolai like he's trying to memorize every detail of our son's face, cataloging the features that came from me and the ones that came from him. And I can practically see him doing the math, calculating exactly how much of Nikolai's life he's missed, how many first words and first steps and first everything's happened without him there to witness them. Genetics are very interesting. They determine what color eyes you have and your hair, and lots of other things about who you are. He reaches out slowly, telegraphing the movement so he doesn't startle Nikolai, and brushes a strand of dark hair away from our son's forehead with a gentleness I didn't know he was capable of. And I'm watching this entire interaction with my heart in my throat because I can see exactly how dangerous this is, how easily Caney could use this moment to plant seeds of doubt in Nikolai's mind about Dominic, about me, about everything we've built. "Nick, sweetheart, let's let Mommy talk to her friend, okay?" I interrupt, unable to watch this scene play out any longer without breaking down completely, and I'm reaching for my son's hand, trying to pull him away from Caney before this fragile moment shatters into something ugly and destructive. Dominic, who's been standing frozen this entire time watching the interaction with an expression of growing realization and horror, finally seems to snap out of his paralysis and moves to help me guide Nikolai back toward his bedroom. But Caney's hand shoots out and catches my wrist with enough force to stop me in my tracks without actually hurting me. And his eyes, when they meet mine, are absolutely feral, full of a possessive hunger that makes my stomach flip with emotions I absolutely don't want to examine. "We're not done here," Caney says quietly, his words meant only for me even though Dominic is close enough to hear them. "Not even close to done, Sarah, and you know it. You've always known that running from me was just delaying the inevitable, that eventually I would find you, and we would have this reckoning. And now here we are, and you're going to tell me everything, every single detail of why you ran, and how you've been living, and what you think happens next. Because I promise you that whatever plan you have, whatever desperate scheme you're cooking up to try and escape me again, it's not going to work." He releases my wrist and stands up in one fluid motion, and he's pulling out his phone and making a call, speaking in rapid Russian to whoever answers, and I catch enough words to understand that he's arranging for people to come collect Victor, to clean up the mess, to make this entire incident disappear like it never happened, because that's what men like Caney do. They control reality itself, bend it to their will through money and violence and connections that reach into every corner of society. Dominic manages to coax Nikolai back to his room with promises of the longest story ever told, and once our son is safely out of earshot, my gentle fiancé turns to me with an expression that's equal parts heartbreak and anger and confusion, and I can see in his eyes that he's already figured out most of it, already put together the pieces of who Caney must be and what our relationship was, and why I've been lying for 5 years. He's Nikolai's father, isn't he? Dominic asks, and it's not really a question because he already knows the answer, can see it written in the genetic similarities between Caney and our son, in the possessive way Caney looks at both of us, in the way I'm standing here with guilt written all over my face. This is who you were running from. This is why you told me Nick's father was dead, because what else could you say? That you were in love with a criminal? That you faked your own death to escape him? That everything about Sarah Davis is a lie you made up to hide from your past? I'm sorry, I whisper, and the words are completely inadequate, but they're all I have. All I can offer in the face of the devastation I've caused to this good man, who never deserved to be collateral damage in my war with Caney. I'm so sorry, Dominic. I never wanted to hurt you, never wanted to drag you into this. I wanted to give Nikolai a normal life, wanted to believe that I could be someone other than the woman who loved a monster. And you were so kind and so good, and you made me feel safe for the first time in years. And I know that's not an excuse for the lies, but it's the only explanation I have. Dominic looks at me for a long moment, and I can see him struggling with something. Some decision he's trying to make. And when he finally speaks, his voice is heavy with a resignation that breaks my heart all over again. You were never really mine, were you? He says. And it's not accusatory. Just sad. Just the acknowledgement of a truth we've both been avoiding. Even when you were with me, even when you said yes to marrying me, some part of you was still with him, still belonged to him in ways that had nothing to do with choice or logic. And I think I always knew it. But I told myself I was imagining things. That the distance I sometimes felt in you was just trauma from losing your husband. But it wasn't that at all. It was the fact that you never really lost him because you can't lose something you never stopped belonging to. He reaches out and touches my face with a tenderness that makes tears spill down my cheeks. And then he's walking away, going to sit with Nikolai. And I'm left standing in the hallway with Caney watching me from the bathroom doorway, where his people have already arrived and are efficiently making Victor disappear, along with all evidence that anything violent happened here tonight. Pack a bag, Caney says once his people have left. Once it's just the two of us in the hallway with the weight of 5 years and 1,000 unspoken things hanging between us. You and Nikolai, pack what you need for a few days, and then you're coming with me. We're going somewhere we can talk without interruption. Somewhere I can keep you both safe while we figure out how deep Victor's betrayal goes, and who else might be coming for you. And yes, Sarah, I know you're going to argue. Know you're going to say you're not going anywhere with me. But let me make something very clear. He closes the distance between us in 2 strides, backing me up against the wall with his body caging mine, not touching me but close enough that I can feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that I'd have to be dead not to feel the electric charge that's always existed between us. Victor tried to have you killed 5 years ago, and he tried again tonight, which means there are other people who know you're alive and who have their own reasons for wanting you dead. And like it or not, I'm the only thing standing between you and a bullet. So you can come with me willingly, and we can do this the civilized way. Or I can throw you over my shoulder and carry you out of here while you scream. But either way, you and my son are leaving with me in the next 20 minutes, and that's not a request. It's a statement of fact. His phone buzzes with an incoming message, and the expression that crosses his face as he reads it makes my blood run cold, because I've seen that look before. right before Caney does something that usually involves a significant amount of violence. "What is it?" I ask, even though I'm not sure I want to know the answer. And Caney looks up at me with eyes that have gone flat and deadly, the eyes of the monster everyone fears, the eyes of a man who's just discovered something that's tipped his carefully controlled fury into something much more dangerous. "Victor wasn't working alone," Caney says, and his voice has gone soft in that way that always means someone's about to die. "My people just informed me that Dominic's phone has been transmitting your location to an unknown number for the past 6 months, which means your sweet, innocent architect has been feeding information to someone, which means either he's been compromised and doesn't know it, or he's been playing you this entire time, and given that I just received confirmation that the unknown number belongs to a burner phone last used to coordinate a hit on a rival family's safe house, I'm leaning toward option 2, which means the man currently sitting in a room with our unprotected son is not who you think he is, and we need to move right now." The world tilts on its axis the moment Caney's words register in my brain, and I'm already moving before conscious thought catches up to my body, racing down the hallway toward Nikolai's room, with Caney's footsteps thundering behind me, and my heart hammering so hard against my ribs that I can barely breathe, because the man I trusted with my son, the man I was going to marry, the man who represented everything safe and normal and good in my carefully reconstructed life, has apparently been selling us out for 6 months, and is currently alone with Nikolai behind a closed door. I hit the door with enough force to slam it open, and the scene that greets me is so perfectly domestic and innocent that for a split second I wonder if Caney made a mistake, if his paranoia and his world of constant betrayal has made him see threats where none exist. Because Dominic is sitting on the edge of Nikolai's bed, reading "Where the Wild Things Are," in that gentle, patient voice he always uses with my son. And Nikolai is curled up against his side with his thumb in his mouth and his favorite stuffed bear clutched in his other hand. And they both look up at me with matching expressions of surprise at my dramatic entrance. But then I see it. The slight tension in Dominic's shoulders that wasn't there before. The way his hand has moved almost imperceptibly closer to the nightstand drawer where I keep Nikolai's extra blankets, but where someone else might keep a weapon. The fractional shift in his expression from gentle concern to something harder and more calculating. And I realize with a sick, plummeting sensation in my stomach that Caney was right, that the man I thought I knew is wearing a mask just as carefully constructed as the one I wore when I became Sarah Davis, and I have no idea who he really is, or what he wants, or how long he's been lying to me while I slept beside him and let him into my son's life. Caney moves past me with lethal grace, positioning himself between Dominic and the door, cutting off any escape route. And the transformation from the man who was gently touching our son's hair just minutes ago to the apex predator standing before us now is so complete and so terrifying that even I take an involuntary step back, despite knowing that his violence isn't directed at me. "Who are you really?" Caney asks, and his voice is conversational, almost pleasant, which somehow makes the question infinitely more menacing, because I've learned that Caney is most dangerous when he sounds calm, when that cold control has locked down over whatever fury is burning underneath. "And please don't insult my intelligence by pretending you don't know what I'm talking about. We both know your phone has been transmitting location data to a burner phone connected to the Constantine family, and we both know that the Constantines have wanted me dead for the past 3 years, ever since I took control of their shipping routes. So the only real question here is whether you're going to tell me the truth voluntarily, or whether I'm going to have to extract it from you in ways that will be extremely unpleasant and will definitely traumatize my son, who I'd prefer to keep innocent for at least a few more years." Dominic's expression shifts again, the mask of the gentle architect cracking and falling away to reveal something colder and more ruthless underneath. And he's looking at me now with an expression that's almost apologetic, almost regretful. And I realize that whatever feelings he had for me, whatever connection we shared, it was all built on a foundation of manipulation and lies that mirror my own deceptions right back at me. "I'm sorry, Sarah, whoever you really are," Dominic says, And his voice has changed too, losing that soft, careful quality and gaining a harder edge that makes him sound like a completely different person. I genuinely didn't want it to come to this, and for what it's worth, I did care about you in my own way. But you have to understand that the Constantine family paid me a substantial amount of money to get close to you, to monitor your movements and report back, because they knew that eventually Volkov would find you, and when he did, you'd lead them right to him. And honestly, 5 years of playing house with you and your kid while waiting for this moment has been tedious as hell, but apparently it's finally paying off. He's reaching for the nightstand drawer now, moving slowly and deliberately, and I'm frozen with the horrible realization that I've been an idiot, that I traded one dangerous man for another without even realizing it, that my desperation for normalcy made me blind to the very real threat that was sleeping in my bed and reading bedtime stories to my son, while planning to use us as bait to lure Caney into a trap. The next few seconds happen in a blur of motion that my brain can barely process. Dominic's hand closing around something in the drawer, Caney moving with inhuman speed to cross the distance between them, my own body lurching forward to scoop Nikolai off the bed and shield him with my body as the two men collide with bone-crushing force. I'm pressing Nikolai's face into my shoulder so he can't see what's happening, making soothing noises even as I hear the sounds of violence behind me, grunts of pain, the crack of bone on bone, the heavy thud of bodies hitting furniture. And Nikolai is crying now, scared and confused, and asking me what's happening in that high, frightened voice that breaks my heart into 1,000 pieces because this is exactly what I was trying to protect him from. This world of violence and betrayal, and men who use love as a weapon. I risk a glance over my shoulder and see Caney straddling Dominic on the floor, his hands around the other man's throat. And there's a gun. An actual gun that Dominic apparently had hidden in my son's nightstand this entire time, lying a few feet away, where it must have been knocked during the struggle. And I'm faced with the surreal and horrible reality that the man I was going to marry was armed and dangerous, and had been living in my home with a weapon within reach of my child's bed. "Mommy, I'm scared. I want this to stop." Nikolai sobs into my shoulder, and I'm making a decision without really thinking about it. Carrying my son out of his room and down the hallway toward my bedroom, where I can barricade us in while Caney deals with Dominic, in whatever brutal, efficient way he deems necessary. Because as much as I hate what Caney represents, and what his world has done to my life, in this moment he's the only thing standing between my son and people who would use a child as leverage in their criminal power plays. I can hear Caney's voice behind me, low and deadly, asking questions I can't quite make out. And I hear Dominic's responses, choked and desperate. And I know that whatever information he's giving up is probably buying him a few more minutes of life, but not much more than that. Because Caney doesn't forgive betrayal, and he certainly doesn't forgive threats to his family. And despite everything I've done, despite 5 years of running and hiding, apparently Nikolai and I still fall into that category of things Caney considers his to protect. I'm locking my bedroom door and pulling out my phone to call. Who, exactly, I'm not even sure. Because what am I going to tell the police that there's a mafia boss fighting with my secretly criminal fiancé in my son's bedroom over a 5-year-old conspiracy that involves my faked death? When I hear a single gunshot that makes me flinch so hard I nearly drop Nikolai, and then silence, heavy and ominous, stretches out for what feels like an eternity before I hear Caney's footsteps in the hallway, measured and calm, and his knock on my bedroom door is almost polite despite the fact that he's almost certainly just killed a man in my apartment. "Sarah, open the door," he says, and his voice is back to that dangerous calm that means the immediate threat has been neutralized, but the larger situation is far from resolved. "We need to leave now. Dominic's phone sent out a distress signal before I could stop him, which means the Constantines know I'm here and they're probably sending people as we speak, and I'd really prefer not to have a shootout in your apartment building with our son present. So if you could please unlock the door and trust me for approximately the next 30 minutes, I promise I'll explain everything once we're somewhere safe." "Trust him," he says, as if trust is something that exists between us after everything we've done to each other. after all the lies and the betrayals and the 5 years of absence, but the terrible truth is that I don't have any other options because staying here means dealing with whatever criminals are coming for us. And running without Caney means trying to protect Nikolai on my own against an enemy I didn't even know existed until 10 minutes ago. So I'm unlocking the door with shaking hands and letting Caney into my bedroom, where he immediately starts pulling clothes out of my closet and shoving them into a bag with the efficient movements of someone who's done this before. Get Nikolai dressed in something warm and comfortable, he instructs without looking at me. And I can see blood on his knuckles, can see the way his shirt is torn at the shoulder. And I know without asking that Dominic is dead, that the man who proposed to me 3 months ago and who I actually considered spending my life with is currently lying in my son's bedroom with a bullet in him. And I should feel something about that. Horror or grief or regret. But all I feel is a numb kind of relief that the immediate threat to Nikolai has been eliminated, even if it means we're now running from an entirely different threat that I never saw coming. The next 20 minutes are a chaotic blur of packing essentials, getting Nikolai dressed while telling him we're going on an adventure, and following Caney down the back stairs of my apartment building to where a black SUV with tinted windows is waiting with the engine already running, and a woman I've never seen before behind the wheel. "This is Zara," Caney says as he practically pushes me into the back seat with Nikolai on my lap, climbing in beside us and signaling for Zara to drive before our doors are even fully closed. She's been with my family since I was a child, and she's one of exactly 3 people in this world I trust completely, which means she's going to help keep you and Nikolai safe while I clean up this mess Victor and the Constantines have created. The SUV pulls away from my building just as I see 2 other black cars pull up to the front entrance, and I watch through the rear window as men in dark suits start pouring out. And I realize that we escaped with maybe seconds to spare. That if Caney had been even slightly slower in neutralizing Dominic, or if I'd hesitated any longer before unlocking my bedroom door, we'd be trapped in my apartment right now with hostile forces closing in and nowhere to run. "Where are we going?" I ask, and my voice sounds strange and distant even to my own ears, like I'm hearing myself from underwater, and Caney is pulling out his phone and making rapid-fire calls in Russian while simultaneously keeping one hand on Nikolai's head, stroking our son's hair with a gentleness that seems completely at odds with the violence he just committed. And I'm struck by the cognitive dissonance of watching a man who can kill without hesitation show such careful tenderness to a child he only officially met an hour ago. "Somewhere they can't follow," Caney finally answers, and his eyes meet mine in the darkness of the SUV's interior. And I can see exhaustion there beneath the adrenaline and the fury. Can see the weight of everything we're both carrying. And his next words send a chill down my spine even as some treacherous part of me recognizes them as an inevitability I've been running toward all along. "Somewhere you'll finally have to stop running and face the fact that, like it or not, Sarah Delacroix, you and I are bound together by more than just the child sleeping between us. We're bound by the fact that the only way either of us survives this is together, and that means no more lies, no more secrets, and no more pretending that you can have any kind of life that doesn't include me in it." 3 months have passed since that blood-soaked night in Portland, when my carefully constructed world of lies burned down around me, and I was forced to confront the reality I'd been running from for 5 years. And now I'm standing in Caney Volkoff's sprawling estate in the Hamptons, watching the Atlantic Ocean crash against the private beach, while Nikolai plays in the sand with the kind of carefree abandon that suggests he's already adapted to this new reality in ways that I'm still struggling to fully accept. And I'm wearing a ring on my finger that weighs almost nothing, but feels like it carries the weight of every choice I've made and every consequence I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. The ring is simple platinum with a single black diamond that Caney says represents the darkness we both carry, the shadows we've learned to live in. And when he slipped it onto my finger 2 weeks ago in his study with only Nikolai and Zara as witnesses, he told me that this wasn't a proposal but rather an acknowledgement of what's always been true, that I belong to him and he belongs to me in ways that transcend conventional morality or socially acceptable relationship structures, and that trying to fight against that fundamental truth has caused nothing but pain and destruction for everyone involved. The weeks following our escape from Portland were a brutal education in just how deep Victor's betrayal had gone, and how many players were involved in the conspiracy that had been building against Caney for years. And I watched from the supposed safety of this estate, while Caney systematically dismantled the network of traitors within his own organization and waged a quiet but vicious war against the Constantine family that ended with most of their leadership either dead or in prison on charges that Caney's people manufactured with terrifying efficiency. I saw him transform from the man who could be gentle with our son to the monster that the criminal underworld fears, and the cognitive dissonance of loving both versions of him, of accepting that they're two sides of the same person rather than separate entities, has been one of the hardest adjustments I've had to make in a process that's been filled with difficult adjustments. Nikolai has thrived in ways that simultaneously fill me with joy and break my heart, because he's attached himself to Caney with the easy affection of a child who's been starving for a father figure without even knowing it, and watching them together. Caney teaching Nikolai chess with infinite patience, reading to him in Russian so our son grows up bilingual, explaining complex concepts in ways a 5-year-old can understand. I'm forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that maybe I was wrong to keep them apart, that maybe my fear of Caney's world harming our child was less about protecting Nikolai and more about punishing Caney for being what he is. The door to the study opens behind me, and I sense rather than see Caney approaching, and when his arms wrap around me from behind and pull me back against his chest, I let myself sink into the embrace in ways I never allowed myself to do before, because whatever else exists between us, the violence and the lies and the betrayals that nearly destroyed us both, there's also this fundamental connection that feels like coming home after years of being lost. And I've finally stopped pretending that I don't need it as much as I need air to breathe. "You're thinking too hard again," Caney murmurs against my hair, and I can hear the smile in his voice, the particular brand of affectionate exasperation he reserves for moments when he catches me spiraling into guilt or regret, or the 1,000 other complicated emotions that come with accepting that I've chosen to build a life with a man whose hands are stained with blood. "I can always tell when you're thinking too hard because you get this little crease between your eyebrows and you forget to breathe properly. And I'd really prefer my wife didn't suffocate herself through excessive contemplation of moral ambiguities that we've already agreed to live with." Wife. The word still sounds strange and surreal, because our wedding was nothing like the conventional ceremony I used to imagine back when I was young and naive enough to believe in fairy tales, but rather a private affair in this very study, with vows that included promises to protect each other and Nikolai from all threats, including ourselves, to never lie about the important things even when the truth is ugly, and to accept that we're building something that exists outside normal society's rules and that our family will always operate according to its own brutal logic. I was thinking about Dominic, I admit, because one of the promises we made to each other was honesty even when it hurts, and Caney's arms tighten around me almost imperceptibly, the only sign that the mention of my dead ex-fiancé still touches some possessive, jealous part of him that he usually keeps locked down. Thinking about how he fooled me for 6 months, how I was so desperate for normalcy that I couldn't see what was right in front of me, and wondering if I'm doing the same thing now, if I'm so desperate to believe that this can work, that we can actually build something real and lasting despite everything we've done to each other, that I'm missing all the warning signs that this is just another disaster waiting to happen. Caney turns me around in his arms, so I'm facing him, and the expression on his face is complex and layered with emotions he's never been good at articulating, but that I've learned to read in the 3 months of living in close quarters and learning each other all over again. "The difference between Dominic and me," he says slowly, choosing his words with obvious care, "is that I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. I'm a monster, Sarah. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew all the details, and I'll probably do more terrible things before I die because that's the world I was born into, and the only world I know how to navigate. But I have never once lied to you about the fundamental truth of who I am, or what loving me means." His hands come up to frame my face. thumbs brushing away tears I didn't realize were falling. And his next words are delivered with such raw honesty that they bypass all my defenses and sink straight into my heart. You are the only thing in my entire life that makes me want to be better than what I am. The only person who's ever looked at me and seen something worth saving, beneath all the violence and the darkness. And if you're asking me if I think this is going to be easy or if we're going to live happily ever after like some goddamn fairy tale, then the answer is no. But if you're asking me if I think what we have is real and worth fighting for despite how hard it's going to be, then the answer is absolutely yes. Because I would burn this entire world down before I let anyone take you or Nikolai away from me again. And that includes letting you take yourself away, through doubt or fear or misplaced guilt about choosing to love a devil. The sound of Nikolai's laughter drifts up from the beach, high and pure and uncomplicated, and we both turn to look out the window at our son, who's building an elaborate sandcastle with Zara's help. And I'm struck by how different his childhood is going to be from the normal, ordinary life I tried to give him in Portland, but also how much happier he seems now that he has both his parents and the kind of resources and protection that come with being a Volkov heir. He asked me yesterday if you were a bad man, I tell Caney, and I feel him tense beside me, waiting for whatever damning judgment our 5-year-old pronounced. He said some of the kids at his new school have fathers who are doctors and teachers and businessmen, and he wanted to know what you do and whether you're a bad man like the villains in his storybooks. Caney's expression has gone carefully blank, and I can see him bracing himself for whatever answer I gave, and I reach up to touch his face, to ground him in this moment. I told him that you're a complicated man who does difficult things to protect the people he loves, and that the world isn't divided into simple categories of good and bad, but rather into people who care about us and people who don't, and that he never has to worry about whether you'll keep him safe because you would move mountains and wage wars to protect him, and that makes you a good father even if you're not always a good man by conventional standards. And what did he say to that? Caney asks, and his voice has gone rough with emotions he's struggling to contain. And I smile at the memory of our son's response. So innocent, and yet so perfectly perceptive in the way that children sometimes are. He said that he likes having a father who can protect us from anything, and that he's glad I stopped running away from you because now we can all be together, and then he asked if he could learn Russian and chess and all the other things you know because he wants to be just like you when he grows up. I watch the impact of those words hit Caney like a physical blow. Watch him struggle with the weight of being someone our son wants to emulate. And when he speaks again, his voice is barely above a whisper. I don't want him to be like me, Sarah. I want him to be better. To have choices I never had. To grow up knowing he can be anything he wants rather than being forced into a role that was decided for him before he was born. And I need you to promise me that no matter what happens, no matter how deep into this world he gets exposed, you'll fight to keep the best parts of him innocent and untouched by the darkness that defines my life. I promise, I tell him, and I mean it with every fiber of my being, because if there's one thing I've learned in these 3 months of building a life with Caney, it's that we balance each other in ways that neither of us could have predicted. He's the strength and the protection and the ruthless pragmatism that keeps our family safe. And I'm the conscience and the humanity and the reminder that violence should be a last resort rather than a first response. And together we're creating something that shouldn't work but somehow does. A family built on blood and love and the understanding that we're all choosing each other every single day, despite how much easier it would be to walk away. The sun is setting over the ocean now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that look like fire, and Caney pulls me closer as we watch our son playing in the fading light. And I realize that this moment, standing here in the arms of a dangerous man, watching our child laugh without fear, knowing that we're protected by wealth and power that comes from morally questionable sources, is as close to peace as people like us are ever going to get. And maybe that's enough. Maybe choosing to love someone despite their darkness rather than because of some false pretense of light is the most honest kind of love that exists. I love you, I tell Caney, and the words still feel strange and dangerous, because loving him means accepting complicity in his world. means acknowledging that I've chosen this life with full knowledge of what it entails. But they're also the truest words I've ever spoken, because despite everything, the violence and the betrayals, and the 5 years of separation that nearly destroyed us both, he's the only person who's ever made me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I love you too, he responds, and then he's kissing me with the kind of desperate intensity that suggests he's still not entirely convinced I'm real, that I won't disappear again. And when we finally break apart, we're both breathless, and his forehead is pressed against mine, and we're just breathing each other in, while the last rays of sunlight paint our world in shades of crimson. Nikolai calls out from the beach that he wants us to come see his castle before the tide takes it away. And Kani takes my hand, and we walk together down to where our son is waiting. And as I watch my child show his father the elaborate sandcastle he's built with such pride and joy, I realize that this is what we fought for, what we bled for, what we nearly died for. Not some sanitized version of domestic bliss, but this messy, complicated, dangerous version of family that exists in the shadows and operates according to its own rules. And as the tide comes in and begins to wash away Nikolai's creation, while he laughs and builds new walls to hold back the water, I understand that we'll spend the rest of our lives doing the same thing, building and rebuilding our family against forces that want to destroy it. And maybe that's the only kind of happily ever after that people like us deserve. The kind we have to fight for every single day. The kind that's beautiful precisely because it's built on truth rather than lies. On acceptance of darkness rather than pretense of light. And as Kani wraps his arm around my waist and Nikolai grabs both our hands to pull us closer to his sandy creation, I finally stop running and let myself believe that I'm home.